Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network. And welcome back, everybody. We're going to talk about something today that's very impactful, very important in your life, because relationships are everything in our lives. How do you create those long-lasting, strong, fortified relationships? There's a process that goes along with that, and a lot of it starts with emotional healing, which we've talked about here before. We're going to dig into all of that today with somebody who helps people with this all the time. And she got a wonderful book out there, by the way, that's all about emotional healing through relationships. She's a great psychotherapist, and she's back with us. Audrey Palmer's on the program. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me once again. Listen, I hope you had a good holiday. You guys had your Thanksgiving last week.
I feel bad because you guys don't celebrate. You're in Canada.
Oh, we do celebrate. We just do it October. We do it a month earlier.
Ah, all right.
So in October, we have our Turkey Day, and you have yours just before Christmas.
Interesting. Educate me on that. What is your Turkey Day called in Canada?
Thanksgiving.
Is it really? Duh.
Yes.
I did not know that. Wow. All right.
Yeah, I think most cultures. I remember when I was little in Jamaica, we there was a fall festival, so it wasn't called Thanksgiving, but it was called Harvest Time, and it was actually tied to religion, because I remember people taking their harvest to the church. And you lay them on the altar, and really it's giving it to the church. They then resell it, and then there's money for the coffers for the church. Wow. But yeah, I think most cultures have something like that, where they're giving thanks to the Lord for just, blessing them with bounty.
Yeah, and we do that a lot. In fact, I just had a meeting the other day with a bunch of people. We want to do a food drive, same kind of concept, to help people out.
Right.
And it's actually coming up a weekend from this weekend that's coming up here. So kind of in between the holidays, but thank you for the education there.
Oh, no problem. My pleasure. It's a real tough time right now. I know that a lot of food drive places, like here we have Second Harvest and all those places, they're really pushing for it, because a lot of people are feeling it financially and have to use the food bank, unfortunately. But for those who have it, give as much as you can, because there are people in real need. Yeah.
And that's all a part of relationships too.
Absolutely. The ability to reach out and be resilient, and people shouldn't feel shame in doing that. It's just, how do I then help my community, help my family? And it's part of being resilient, to give and receive help.
That's a really great point in terms of receive help, because many of us are uncomfortable, and I think we don't look at it on the other side. When you ask somebody for help, many times it's not a drain to them. It's an honor for them to be able to help you, because it makes them feel good. And a lot of times we look at it as like, I don't want to bother, I don't want to be, that needy person that needs help, but I need help, but I'm not going to ask. I've got pride. But on the flip side, people want to help. It makes them feel good.
It sure does. We talked about, I think the first week, that we don't have these proverbs anymore. But one that comes to mind as you were talking, a friend in need is a friend indeed. And it's important to know that, because people do feel good. And it's, we all want to feel altruistic in some ways, but we do want to know that we have the ability to help, because you never know when you could be on the receiving end of help. So yeah. Absolutely.
I have done charitable work for pretty much my entire career, and I'll never forget what somebody told me. And this is probably 25 years ago, if not more. I was working with a charity, and this statement always stuck with me. You never know. You could be one paycheck away from being homeless. You don't know what life holds, and that's why you do the right thing. You help others, because you might need help someday. You never know what's going to be.
You just never know. And it is a part of emotional healing. For some people, it's their need to give back to the community because they were in the situation. I remember we're kind of going off in different topics, but it's all related. There was a woman who most of her life had to survive on our social system. And I feel no shame in talking about it because we are heavily taxed in Ontario. But I don't mind because we are the undergird for people who are struggling. And there was a woman who had to, because of her many children and no husband, she had to rely on the system. As it turns out, she won, a small little jackpot. And she sat down and calculated how much she received and returned it and said, "This is to thank you for all that you did for me, and
Wow.
someone else can receive this." So it's amazing what people will do.
Wow.
A lot of times people say, "Oh, they just want to live off the system." That's not always the case.
It's
Yeah.
it's not always the case. And I'm just going to say here, there are a lot of people milking the system that don't
Hmm.
need help. And I've heard recently somebody I'm fairly close to and was kind of surprised how they downplay their salary so they can be part of, the extended help. And
Oh boy.
yeah. And for a moment I was like, wow, look at how much you're saving. And right
Hmm.
away, and a part of me was like, yeah, that would be nice. And then the other part of
Hmm.
me was like, no, that's not the right
Yeah.
thing. And don't
Yeah.
ever go down that road. It's just
And
not.
most people know it's the right thing. And, we talked about the emotional healing part, and then we talked about vulnerability. That's a part of being vulnerable, being able to swallow your pride and saying, "Hey, I need some help today, and tomorrow I may give it back."
Yeah.
And as you talk about that, when you talk to your friend, do you get into the conflict and say, "Hey, man, you really don't need the help. Leave it for someone else who could use it." Because conflict is also a way of becoming closer to a person
Yeah.
and helping them refine their values and their values in life.
I haven't had any deeper conversations with him because I'm not kidding. This was 12 hours ago, 15 hours
Oh,
ago.
wow.
Yes. And I was like, oh, and I'm just going to say, I didn't expect that from this person. And that's all.
Right.
None of my business. You do your own thing. I'm in my lane. I'm doing my thing as we all are doing our own thing here. We're talking about lasting bonds and relationships today.
Yes.
Before we get to that, how about a quick recap of some of the other things we talked about, like emotional healing, vulnerability, and such?
Hmm. We absolutely, and part of it, as we started, sharing this, is how do you allow yourself to be vulnerable, wondering what someone else is going to think about you. But when we allow the vulnerability, and there's actually an author, and I forget the name of that person now, but they say that for people, vulnerability is not a state that you move into, but it's a state of who we are as humans because we need community, we need people to function effectively and to manage. We must have been having parallel conversations because yesterday I had a conversation with a young woman who's leaving an abusive home situation. And because you have to do first and last in so many things, she was just left strapped, not being able to buy groceries. And I said, "Honey, let's make a list of the food banks and you need to go to them and get your groceries." It's a huge chunk, but you can't fall apart. And it's just for her to share that with me allowed the vulnerability and a solution to be able to then go and talk about what she can do to make ends meet. And, it could be conflictual because she's leaving a very conflicted situation.
Mm.
And in time, as she can kind of get on her own footing, she will be able to repair the relationship with her family. But for now, it's her saying, "I have enough self respect to walk away from being hit and punched and kicked. I don't want that anymore." And in time, hopefully, we can all find our own healing and kind of come back together. And then it brings us, to what you talked about, lasting relationships. How do we have those lasting bonds and make sure that they stay? I mean, you can probably think of a couple friends who you've known for a long time. And there's so much pleasure in knowing someone who's been a companion for many years. They know you don't have to explain who you are. They simply know you.
Hmm. Yes, indeed. And they're always there for you. And
Right.
one friend in particular, known since I was 17, kind of my
Wow.
it's kind of my sage. She's a therapist as well, and
Okay.
always been friends throughout the years. And called upon her about 4 years ago. I was in a certain situation, needed her insight and feedback. She was with me every step of the way, and almost daily communication. And now I work with her sister because I needed somebody in my work capacity. And I know that if I fire off a text right now and how are things going, and if I needed her, she needed me, she'd be right there. But so
Right.
it's a great point that you bring up, knowing those people are there. But what about the newer people? Let's say the newer people in your life, a year, 3, whatever. How do you make those bonds stronger?
So the first thing to do, and it's going to sound so trite, but it's so true, is to start on trust. If you cannot trust the person who's sitting in front of you, knowing that their yes is yes and their no is no, it makes it very difficult. Open communication, as much as it's difficult to have those nuanced, painful conversations, it's better to have them swallow, go to your corners, and then come back and say, look, are we okay? And so having those open communication, and that kind of grows out of trust or out of respect. When you respect a person enough to say, do you know what? When you humiliated me in front of those people who I didn't know, I didn't appreciate it because it does a few things. One, it sets a standard for who I am with them, blah, 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 blah. And we can have that conversation, but it's showing respect for the other person. And really, that grows out of love, doesn't it?
100%. It's funny that you're saying this. I think I share with you, I'm part of a men's group, and
Yeah.
we have a thing called clearing a list. So when you've got a beef with somebody, we'll call it a conflict, or they did something you're unhappy with, there's always a moment. Does anybody have a list to clear today? And the way it works, and I think it's wonderful, and I've seen it in action, where
I'd like to hear.
you stand up and say, I have a list to clear with John over there. John gets up, you stand next to each other, you put your hand on each other's heart, and you say, John, I love you, man. You're a great, great man. However, what you did was not, and you just go into it, and then you
Right.
you get it out into the open, and,
Right.
and now you're done. Hug, that's it, and we move on. But we clear the air, because a lot of times that stuff just festers, and
It festers.
it's the worst. It's like cancer.
I'm curious, and how do the men react to that? Because at the risk of sounding sexist, it's a real female thing to do, to talk about it openly. But you actually put hands on each other and say it out loud, and then you hug it out in the end. And does it resurface at any point?
I've never seen it, and sometimes it's not deeper stuff. It could be, you said you were going to call me, or you said you would be there and you weren't. But it can go even deeper. And there's been a few times where I've seen lists be cleared, and I actually got a little uncomfortable, like as somebody was, spilling why they weren't happy with the other person.
Right.
And almost a little bit emotional too at the end, where I don't want to say we kiss and make up, but there's a hug, and it's just like, we're good now. We're good now.
Right.
Powerful. It's just powerful.
It sounds amazing, I have to tell you. That's fantastic. Unfortunately, I think with some others, it can linger,
Yes.
and people ruminate, and then they come
Yes.
back to it. And at some point, you want to say, okay, we need to have this done,
Yeah.
because you can't keep ruminating about the same thing. And that leads us into forgiveness, doesn't it? Because in order to kind of put it aside and move forward, we have to really do the work of forgiveness, forgiving self. And so it could be that people are embarrassed that they weren't there for you when they said, I'd help you move. And then, that commercial where the girl's sitting on the side of the road and it's raining, and no one showed up to help her move. And she's by herself. It's forgiving that you didn't follow through on your word, forgiving yourself, and also forgiving whoever held you up. Let's just assume that you've been held up. So that's a part of the forgiveness as well, to be able to move on. It's when we can't forgive that we're stuck and we keep circling the same thing
Yes.
over and over again.
Oh, and it can just, like a cancer, fester and grow and starts spreading out, and that takes over other parts of your life, that animosity. You said before, Audrey, the word trust.
Yes.
And it wasn't more than 30 minutes ago, I was on a phone call with a very close friend, and we're doing some business stuff together.
Right.
And the word trust came up.
Uh-huh.
And I shared with him something I pilot by, and I want your feedback on it.
Okay.
And I didn't make this up. I saw it somewhere. It could be Bob Marley. I don't know if I shared this with you before. It could be who created these 3 sentences. It might have been Shakespeare. I don't know, but it resonated with me. And especially in my journey in the last few years. It is love everyone, trust few, do the right thing for all, not just yourself, but for all. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's powerful if you can remember them.
Just keep saying them. Just keep saying them.
Keep saying them. The for all part really resonates with me because I think for most people, it's do everything for some because all is very encompassing.
Well, I added that, to be very honest with you.
Oh, you added the all part?
I did, because I looked at that, because I'm going to do the right thing. Yeah, that can be self-serving. I'm just going to do the right thing for me. No, call it the right thing for the greater good. How is it going to affect somebody else? The most important part of those 3 sentences for me is trust few. And it's almost painful to say those words, but that's what I've learned. You can't trust everyone, unfortunately. You can love them. I can walk into, you feel love everywhere. You walk into a convenience store, and just feel love. Hey, thank you for making the barista. Thank you for making my coffee. I love you for it. It's delicious. I trust you 100%. And that was for me. And you brought up the word trust before. So that's why I wanted to share that. That resonated.
Well, trust is on a continuum, isn't it? So you will trust that person to make your coffee and not put salt in it instead of sugar. That's basic trust we all have for one another. Would you give your PIN number and your bank card to them and walk away? No, that would be foolish, right? And so it's on a continuum. But it goes back to, and I love to use this phrase and I use it often, trust but verify, from dear Mr. Ronald Reagan. You want to do that where you're giving some level of trust, but where it becomes really important, you want to go for verification. Is there truth in this? Are they being truthful to me? And as you do that verification, the trust starts to grow with the other person. You talk about your 3 sentences that I like. I really love one that it's actually a Bible passage that I've distilled into 3 simple sentences. It's in the Old Testament I might have said it before, I can't remember. But the prophet asks, what does God require of you, O man? And then he gives the answer, and that is to do justly, love mercy, and walk humbly before your God. And so I've distilled it down to 3 sentences for myself. What does it mean to do justly? What does justice mean, not just for you, but everyone else? Love mercy. What does it mean to love mercy? If you love it, you must know it. If you know it, you must live it in order to love it. And then walking humbly before your God. What does that mean? And so I distilled that into those 3 simple words. I actually taped it to my desk when I was in corporate and looked at it every day, because we had to make decisions. I worked for a child protection organization, and I was the manager, and we were making decisions about people's permanence and whether their children could stay with them and what it means. And do you make a decision because you're angry or you didn't like the way that they spoke to you, or whatever the case may be. And so I like that you have almost your touchstone for life, that if we all have that we live by, we would be better off as a community. And for me, this is my touchstone.
Wow.
Mercy, justice, and humility.
Interestingly, that is similar to what I shared. If you want to look at it and break it down, and what a position you were in with Child Protective Services, and you really, when you needed to make decisions, you really needed to take a moment there, I feel, and soul search. To your point, you're changing somebody's life potentially over here. They may have spoken to you a certain way, and maybe you were offended. That wasn't nice the way they spoke with me. And I'm feeling that you have to take a look at that and have some latitude. They're going through a tough time. Maybe they didn't target you personally with the words that they used. You can't always use that as your basis to make this decision over here. So I'm looking at what you just shared as that's you stepping on the brakes and processing all the pieces here to do your job. Does that sound
right?
Kind of what it was
Absolutely.
like? Yeah.
And you can never use their bad language to define your decision for them.
Or their actions, or their whatever it is.
Whatever. Yeah. So no, that's fantastic. And so I know we're running up against time right now, but the other piece is we talk about love languages always in the context of a lover, but we can talk about it in the context of just relationships.
Yes.
How do we like to show up for people or people to show up for us? Do we know what our language is? Do we want affirmation? Do we need a hug, personal touch? What do we need in order to feel like we're a part of them? Acts of service. Do you know what your language is?
That's really interesting. And as you're saying that, I'm thinking to myself that we don't do this. It's only in a romantic relationship that the 5 love languages come up, but it can apply to most other situations. For me, I have to remember all 5 of them. But, affection.
Yeah.
And appreciation. I don't need acts of service. All of that, or I don't need, what's the other one, the gift one?
Giving gifts, acts of service, physical touch, quality time.
Yeah. Quality time is there, but the appreciation, that one resonates, and it's happened in relationships where I've, said, I don't feel appreciated. I do.
Right.
Honestly, I'm an empath. I do everything for everybody. Oh, and then take care of yourself. And I felt that, lack of appreciation, and it's actually come up. So I know that's probably top on my list there. How about you?
So mine's interesting. What I find actually fascinating with people is they use their language to manage someone else. And so if their love language is acts of service, they are constant doing acts of service for someone else. And I've had to say, hang on, what's his love language? How does he want you to be with him? And they're like, I don't know. Well, that's the first thing you need to find out, because your language can't be the way you use it for someone else.
Now, let me make sure I understand that correctly. So let's say acts of service is your top, language that resonates with you. So you're saying me or you, we're doing acts of service for somebody else, just doing everything that might not be what they want or need.
Absolutely.
But we're doing it because we think it's important.
Exactly. So if your language is if mine's acts of service and yours is affirmation, I need to affirm you.
Yeah.
You need to then do acts of service for me.
It's as crazy as this sounds, like the men's group. I'm the shaman in the men's group, by the way. They made me that.
Are you?
So I share little nuggets of information I get from people like you, and I look like I'm the smartest man in the room. I'm actually going to bring up the 5 love languages, and I'm going to go around the room next time we get together and ask each man to pick 2. What are your top 2? I think it might be an eye-opener because you always think of it in terms of a romantic relationship.
Right.
But never in a friendship.
But it has to be. And so whether you believe it or not, again, love is on a continuum. And so people that you spend time with, you absolutely have a love for them. It's not in a romantic way, but it's there. It'll be interesting if you ask the men if they know the language of their partner, because that's how they need to demonstrate love for them.
That'll be round 2.
Round 2.
That, and I'm going to ask one question here based on that. So
sure.
When you present it to a friend, one of the languages is affection, right?
Yes.
How does that change when it's not a romantic relationship? What would you call it, substitute or change it? Because obviously, you say acts of affection between men, it could be a handshake, could be a hug, whatever it is. But how does that
slap
translate?
on the back?
Okay. All right. Yeah. I'm trying to take that and then use it in other situations.
Right.
Mm,
And so it has to, of course, be in the context of what's healthy and normative.
right.
So you certainly wouldn't go and kiss a guy because then he'll clock you. But going to a game together, sitting together, talking, reminiscing, those kinds of things are probably okay with the
Yeah.
fellas.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That close connection. And when you see, somebody you haven't seen in a while, some people, even men, hug other men. Hey man, how you doing?
Absolutely.
There's others like, I'm good. We can just fist
Yeah.
bump, fist bump. I
Just
don't want to
fist
shake your
bump.
hand,
Yeah.
whatever.
Right.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I have to be honest with you, Audrey,
Sure.
and I'm very transparent. I know we've done a bunch of shows together and they've been wonderful. I feel I've learned so much about you today and connected with you. And I didn't realize that you worked for Child Protective Services.
Yes.
And that says a lot in terms of you and what you offer to people and how you get in somebody's head or help them get inside their head and understand.
Right.
Wow. Yeah. Great topic.
It actually helps me. I have to tell you, sometimes when I see couples and they are violent with one another, and and I'll correct it. Everyone's thinking, "Oh, that poor woman's getting abused." It's not always the women. I have to tell you,
I hear
and
you.
I've had to say to women, if this was your husband, I'd be saying the same thing. You hit him one more time, and I am obligated by law to call the authorities.
Yeah.
And violence in your home is not okay, even if you do it. And I give them the spiel. And I remember one woman just was in tears. Please don't call on my child. I'm like, you need to quit hitting your husband. It's just not okay.
Yeah.
And a lot of times those things go undercut because men don't want to report it, but it's just as destructive
I get it.
to children.
I get it. And I am not condoning abuse or anything like that, but I will say
Right.
a relationship does take two.
Oh, yes.
And leave it at that. Again, there is no place for any kind of violence whatsoever, not tolerated, but a relationship does take two.
It does take two.
Wow. Wonderful talking with you today. If somebody is going through some challenges and this resonates, how do they connect with you? And if you're in an abusive situation, obviously where you are, anywhere, 911 here in the States, you need to get help. But outside of that, psychotherapy situations and you helping people with their emotional healing, vulnerability and all of that, how do we find you?
So you can find me at genesisclinicalservices.ca. The book is online. Feel free to go ahead and purchase. It's a good book.
Yeah.
It's the holiday time. Give it to a few people. But I will say to connect with your local counseling organizations. And as we wrap up, don't be so condemning of people who stay and return repeatedly. It usually takes about 5 or 6 tries before a woman actually, or a man actually says, you know what, this is enough. So it's not that easy because people are in a vulnerable position. It's expensive. It's difficult to leave, especially when children are involved. And so be kind. Be gentle, and remember everyone you meet is going through something. So
Amen.
kindness counts.
It's funny you say the word kind. I do a radio show. So I play music as well. Do a lot.
Okay.
I end every radio show with be kind to yourself and others.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, be kind to yourself.
Yes.
It's a pleasure.
Audrey, wonderful having you on here. I feel somewhere along the way through Genesis, we'll connect again. And I appreciate everything you offer. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care.
You too.
Bye-bye. Women are intelligent and ambitious. But after years of caring for others, it's easy to feel frustrated and lost. Many women find themselves searching for a place to direct their skills and experiences. If you are ready to uncover what you truly want, emotional healing through relationships can provide the support and insights that you need. Visit genesisclinicalservices.ca and click on the book icon. It's time to leave the pain behind and embrace your potential. You'll be happy you did.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
What I know about courage, I learned from my adoptive mom. She said sometimes you just gotta hold on and know we'll get through this. Mom, we are so high up. Hold my hand.
No, you hold my hand.
Here we go.
Learn about adopting a teen from foster care. You can't imagine the reward. Visit adoptuskids.org to find out more.
I learned patience from my adoptive dad. All he had to say was,
"Hey, you got this. Just breathe." Hey, we're pretty good.
yeah,
Might have to start a band.
I got it.
Learn about adopting a teen from foster care. You can't imagine the reward. Visit adoptuskids.org to find out more. This message is brought to you by Adopt US Kids, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, and the Ad Council.